A wealthy household can fund relief, employ workers fairly, and support ministry. The same fortune can also become a shield against dependence on God. Scripture therefore refuses to judge prosperity by account size alone. Its warnings examine where security is placed, how power changes behavior, and whether possessions serve love or self-protection. Before asking how much wealth is too much, the deeper question is what kind of devotion money is quietly replacing. Paul's wording in 1 Timothy identifies the mechanism. Not money, but the love of money becomes a root from which many evils grow. The warning concerns craving a desire that can make profit overrule conscience, relationships, and faithfulness. Coins possess no will, yet a person can grant them the power to define success and dictate choices. That distinction changes the investigation, because Scripture can condemn greed while still presenting faithful people who own substantial resources. Genesis introduces Abraham not as a poor exception, but as a patriarch rich in livestock, silver, and gold. His abundance soon produces practical pressure. Grazing land becomes contested, so he allows Lot the first choice and accepts the less attractive territory rather than protect every advantage. Later, he uses his household strength to rescue Lot and welcomes travelers with costly hospitality. His wealth becomes evidence of character only when generosity and obedience cost him something. But would every prosperous believer pass that test? Job makes the issue harder. He begins with enormous possessions, loses nearly everything, and later receives abundance again. Yet the story refuses to treat either wealth or poverty as a simple verdict on his soul. If this distinction is challenging your assumptions, share your view in the comments and leave a like. Then consider the next surprise. Why did Jesus choose such a materially simple life? Jesus entered the world without a palace, lived without visible luxury, and depended at times on hospitality and support from others. That simplicity reveals freedom from status, but it does not automatically create a universal rule that every disciple must own nothing. His message targeted allegiance more deeply than lifestyle imitation alone. The real pressure appears when he confronts one successful man whose possessions had become something far more powerful. One wealthy seeker approaches Jesus with morality, status, and confidence already intact, yet one command exposes what still controls him. Release his possessions, give to the poor, and follow. Jesus never announces a universal bank balance that disqualifies people. He identifies this man's rival master. The shocking result is grief, not anger, because he recognizes the cost. Why, then, does Jesus immediately speak of a camel and a needle? It sounds impossible. Jesus said it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter God's kingdom. Shocking listeners who assumed wealth proved God's favor. The surprise is that he was exposing confidence in riches, not setting a financial limit. But if wealth is not the true obstacle, what invisible master can quietly take control of the human heart? The answer is unsettling. Scripture never says money has a mind of its own. Yet Jesus warned that no one can serve both God and wealth because every master demands loyalty. A surprising detail is that money often becomes an idol without anyone bowing before it. If that happens silently, how can someone recognize the danger before it shapes every decision? Here is the warning. 1 Timothy does not call money the root of all evil. It says the love of money produces many kinds of evil, changing the target from possessions to desire itself. That small difference has transformed countless misunderstandings. But if the problem begins inside the heart instead of the wallet, what unmistakable signs reveal that captivity has already begun? The clues are often ordinary. Pride whispers that success proves personal worth. Greed insists there is never enough. And misplaced security treats savings as a safer refuge than God. The surprising part is that these attitudes can grow in comfortable silence long before anyone notices outward changes. So what perspective does Scripture offer that breaks this hidden grip? Everything changes with one idea. The Bible repeatedly presents people as stewards rather than permanent owners because everything ultimately belongs to God, making wealth a trust instead of a trophy. That unexpected shift transforms spending, saving, and giving into acts of responsibility rather than ownership. But how can anyone know whether that stewardship is genuine instead of merely sounding spiritual? Generosity reveals the answer. Giving freely exposes whether wealth serves the heart or the heart serves wealth. And even small gifts offered with joy can carry greater spiritual weight than impressive donations made for recognition. Which biblical example of generosity has challenged you the most? Share it in the comments. And if this journey is helping you see these passages differently, a like truly supports the channel before we meet the person who embodied this lesson in an unforgettable way. Jesus praised a gift that looked almost worthless. A poor widow offered 2 tiny coins. Yet he said she had given more than everyone else because she gave from deep trust instead of leftover abundance. The surprise is that heaven measured surrender before amount. If value is not counted by size, what happens when wealthy believers dedicate everything they own to God's purposes? The answer is surprisingly encouraging. Joseph of Arimathea provided his own tomb for Jesus. Lydia opened her home to the growing church, and other believers used property, influence, and resources to strengthen the Christian community. Their wealth became a tool instead of an identity. But if prosperity can serve God, what purpose does Scripture repeatedly place before every believer with more than enough? Scripture answers with remarkable consistency. Caring for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger appears again and again because generosity reflects God's own character. Wealth gains its highest purpose when it relieves another person's burden rather than simply increasing personal comfort. Yet Jesus pushed the idea even further by speaking about an investment that cannot lose its value. Jesus called that investment treasure in heaven. He was not dismissing earthly possessions, but revealing that every generous act can carry eternal significance long after money itself disappears. That unexpected perspective transforms wealth from a final destination into a temporary assignment. But does that mean careful saving shows weak faith, or is something else being warned against? Biblical wisdom draws a careful line. Proverbs praises planning ahead, while Jesus warns against storing possessions out of fear and believing bigger barns can guarantee tomorrow. The difference is not the size of a savings account, but the condition of the heart that depends on it. That raises one final question. Can financial success and faithful discipleship truly walk together? Financial success does not automatically prove God's favor, and financial hardship does not automatically signal His disapproval. Christianity measures faithfulness by trust, humility, generosity, and obedience rather than the size of a bank account. Contentment frees wealth from becoming an idol and turns every resource into an opportunity to serve. If this perspective challenged your assumptions, share your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like if you found it valuable, and consider which kind of riches truly last. Contentment changes everything. Scripture never says peace begins after you own enough, because comparison keeps moving the finish line. Paul learned to be content in plenty and in need, proving that inner freedom can exist before circumstances improve. That sounds almost impossible today, yet one ordinary daily habit quietly reveals whether contentment is real or only imagined. Choices reveal priorities. Every paycheck, purchase, investment, and gift quietly answers the question of what we trust most. Supporting a family, planning wisely, and giving generously can all honor God when money stays a tool instead of becoming an identity. What if everyday decisions expose our direction? What questions uncover the motives that even successful people often hide from themselves? Honest questions cut deeper. Would losing your savings weaken your faith, or only your comfort? Do you celebrate another person's success with gratitude, or does envy quietly take control? Those answers often reveal more than any bank statement. Yet Scripture points to an even greater measure that goes beyond private feelings and reaches visible actions. The pattern becomes unmistakable across Abraham, Job, Zacchaeus, and generous believers in the early church. God never measured people by the size of their possessions, but by where their trust, obedience, and generosity were directed. That surprising consistency answers many assumptions. Yet one final question still remains. If the evidence keeps pointing the same way, what is the clearest verdict? The evidence leads to a clear conclusion. Wealth itself is never presented as the sin, but loving it, trusting it, or placing it above God becomes the danger repeated throughout Scripture. Money can strengthen generosity or quietly replace devotion, depending on who remains in command. That leaves one final challenge, and it cannot be answered by anyone except you. Only you can answer this honestly. If money disappeared tomorrow, would it take your security with it? Or would your hope remain rooted in God? That question matters far more than the balance in any account. If this journey gave you a fresh perspective, share your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like to support more evidence-based biblical explorations. And let this question stay with you long after the screen goes dark.